name is Chris GUIN. I am the lead developer for Adventures of Chris. I did the music and the programming and the writing, and have Kyle Anderson did most of the art and animation. So it's been mostly a two-person project. The Adventures of Chris is a 90s throwback kind of game. It is an adventure platformer, kind of the style of some of your, like, I would say it's most akin to a lot of the Disney animated 90s games from back in the day on the Super Nintendo and Genesis, but with a cartoony hand-animated aesthetic. So, you get to go on an adventure, travel the world, fight a lot of different cartoon villains, with a little bit of that kind of 90s Saturday morning cartoon flair to it. So there were a number of games that inspired Adventures of Chris. I would say first and foremost was Quackshot starring Donald Duck for the SEGA Genesis. It's not a game that I feel like a lot of people necessarily seem to know, but if you played your Disney 90s platformers, it was one of my favorites. Like, the soundtrack of that game was amazing. The Indiana Jones type adventure and going around the world was obviously a big part of the structure of the game. And just kind of the charm of the sprites and their expressiveness and the color of it was a big impact. I would say that game probably comes closest to being like the primary influence. But then Mega Man X was another big deal. Mega Man X kind of gave me more of the shooter aspects of it, the particular speed of it. Mega Man X feels fast in some ways, but it's actually a kind of deliberate, the way that he moves through the game. You feel powerful, you get all these abilities, but there's some thought that goes into it too. The big thing for Mega Man X was the way that you acquire abilities and amass them, and you gradually, like, X's journey from weak to strong is pretty compelling as well. Chris's floating ability is, pretty heavily influenced from Super Mario World. That pretty much came from there. There's just a lot sort of 90s animated platformers that really focused on going to different places and seeing a lot of colors and meeting a lot of characters, where every level was kind of different and would introduce a new mechanic. And it wasn't just necessarily the same thing but harder, but you were getting to see new content. Part of the excitement of these games was, saying, okay, well, I wonder what's going to come next, and where are you going to go next, and what are you going to see next, and what monsters are you going to fight? And so just not knowing, I think is really important. Yeah, so it wasn't just like the games that influenced Adventures of Chris. It was also a lot of the 90s Saturday morning cartoons, particularly Ninja Turtles. For me, it was a big deal as a kid. But also you had this world where it was sort of like the real world, like, hey, there's New York. This is, in theory, this is where we live. But at the same time, like, there's all this crazy stuff happening in kind of this other space within this world. And it's a lot of fun to think about that kind of thing. It gets your little kid imagination running wild. You also have the idea of, like, the heroes in this universe are kind of freaks. They're weird, and they're a little bit outcast themselves. And so there's a little bit of, like, I think that's a big 90s thing in general, that sense of the underground hero, the hero that, like, comes from an unexpected or even ironic place. Like, even you think about, like, turtles really shouldn't be ninjas. They're slow. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And it probably starts back when I was actually a 7th grader. I was learning how to make games using a really old tool called Click and Play. If there's any other game devs out there, they'll probably be familiar with it. It was a fun tool in the 90s. I made a whole bunch of games playing around, sort of cutting my teeth on it, and one of those games was the very first version of Adventures of Chris. You'd make games, you'd use, like, stolen MIDI, stolen pixel art and stuff, you'd download and put in a lot of inside jokes, put in all your friends in there, and just kind of be silly and have fun with it. And I found the old game on an old hard drive several years ago, and I'm like, hey, what would be fun? Let's make this for real and kind of clean it up. And I'd done the computer science degree. I knew how to program now. I knew how to actually make it. First off, I did a pixel art version for the Ouya back in 2014. And then I was like, well, now I'm going to try my hand at Steam, try to ramp it up a bit. Why switch from pixel art to, like, hand-animated 90s cartoon? I think it's because, for me at least, like, I love pixel art games, don't get me wrong, but it always was kind of a stopgap, like, because I was doing it myself, and I thought, well, I can kind of imitate existing sprites, plot your pixels on there one by one, and kind of do something that vaguely looks like a 90s game and call it a day. And then I thought, what I really want to do, though, is something that really captured the feeling of 2D hand-drawn animation. I've always liked 3D animation. I like Pixar, I like that stuff, but there's always been a special place in my heart for traditional hand-drawn 2D stuff from my childhood. And, you know, of course, that's not been as popular. It was something that I'm like, you know, if I can make a game that feels a little bit more like actually being in that world of 90s cartoons, like Ninja Turtles, Captain Planet, all the Saturday morning stuff that I remember so fondly from that day. You know, get a little bit of that vibe in there. We find ourselves constantly like asking really bizarre questions like, so how does a monster made out of smog wear a tie? Like, how does that fit on him? How did the theme of Adventures of Chris kind of evolve, and where did it come from? Because I would say the roots of it are basically almost pure silliness. That the idea was just imitate the games that I knew as a kid and sort of take the things that I loved and concentrate them as much as I could, you know, with my limited kid programming skill set, which is, you know, pretty limited. And then, you know, I started to realize when I was remaking it that there are some, like, I wanted there to be a real story here, and I wanted Chris to not just be a joke, but to actually be a character, and to there to be some relatability there. And so I thought, you know, there's a sense in which this is real. What this really is a story of a kid who is, you know, kind of picked on and bullied and teased and sort of a little bit of the outcast in his little school. And he winds up getting to become a super powerful hero over the course of the game. And so there's the nature of gameplay and adventure platformers and Metroidvanias and stuff. It's very good at giving you that visceral sense of getting more and more powerful as you collect, you know, in some cases inventory items, but eventually, Chris, you're getting abilities. And the game changes a lot as you learn these skills, and things that were challenging now become trivial and so on. At least that's the goal, is to get Chris to feel much stronger in big leaps as you play the game, and he gets more and more abilities. What starts off is like, okay, you know, he's kind of a joke character. You know, by the end, throwing lightning like a Sith Lord and doing all kinds of stuff. By the end, he's become a much more confident character as well. So I would hope that when players have, you know, finished Adventures of Chris, they come away with a feeling of just like having gone on a really satisfying adventure, or heard a story with a satisfying conclusion that, you know, this kid who was kind of a nobody for a little bit got to play the hero. Yeah, I would just, you know, think that it would capture a little bit of that feeling of going on an adventure where you don't know what's going to happen next, and you're not sure what the game is going to throw at you in the next level, but always, you know, thinking, oh, I can't wait to get back in and see what happens. And then, you know, after you beat it, like, you know, I really would like to do that again, but harder. So second quest, you know, I'll play that. That would be a good thing I'd want people to feel.